Do not have sufficient common sense gun safety laws, even in the face of repeated mass killings.
Gun-free zones, and when you say that, that's target practice for the sickos and for the mentally ill.
Court fees because of the way that the NRA gets its way in our Congress, and we take a back seat. It's time to stand up.
I reiterate how important it is we not let yet another terrible instance go by.
Gun control doesn't work.
And you obviously are not just going to have a weapon sitting on the kindergarten teacher's desk.
In 1776, the founders wrote our Constitution. In the Second Amendment, they established the right to bear arms.
This was initially enacted to prevent forces of tyranny from spreading through the United States. However, it is now being used as a blanket term for any instance involving gun control.
But the true question is, what effect do guns have on American society? To answer this question, we should compare the U.S. to other countries in the amount of gun homicides.
Already tried gun control and it didn't really work. Instituted in 1997, here we see that the gun-related homicides didn't actually decline after the handgun ban. Rather, they continued to hover roughly around the same number as before.
9,484 homicides. In Japan, there were 11. Let's look at 2007. In the United States, there were 10,086. In Japan, 22. This is all based on FBI data and also The Atlantic. And in 2006, in the United States, there were 10,225 gun-related homicides. In Japan, there were only 2.
These sets of data seem to contradict each other. What's the difference between Japan's gun laws and Britain's?
Well, Britain just implemented gun control, whereas Japan made it illegal to own a gun altogether.
But this may be attributed to the cultural difference between America and Japan. But there is a country, however, that has many similar properties to America and has tried gun control in the past with much success. The country is Australia.
Bill of Rights. We don't have constitutional guarantees in relation to these things. However, doesn't alter the fact that our murder rate using guns has fallen, and there's not much doubt in my mind that it's the availability of guns that causes such a high rate of murder.
0.26 deaths per 100,000, while in Australia that figure is 1.06. So it is a massive difference in terms.
Just, in the recent months, obviously gun control is a big part of your campaign, but how can you convince people now that gun control, considering how many times it's tried and failed, that is it anything more than a fantasy?
Well, it isn't. And in part because most people in America, 92% the last I checked, and 85% of gun owners support these common sense measures. Universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the online and Charleston loopholes, and doing whatever we can to repeal the immunity from all liability that gun makers and sellers.
On our trip to D.C., we noticed a protester in front of the White House. We decided to interview him about his stance on guns. He was moderate, saying, "I grew up in Compton, California. I believe guns are important for safety. I only felt safe in Compton when I had a gun around." But he also admitted, we need to make sure that the right people have those guns. That requires better background checks.
The theory of moderation is what we believe America needs. We posit the theory that neither gun control extreme is true. Guns certainly provide safety, but only in the hands of right people. So we need better checks to make sure only these people get guns. It's an imperfect system, and it always will be. But guns are tools for different things depending on whose hands they're in.
America needs to moderate whose hands those are.
So in a final sense, is it worth it? Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in a final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. The world in arms is not spending money alone. It is the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. President Eisenhower.